Have you ever worked your fingers to the bone for someone else's success, only for them to stab you in the back the moment you tried to start your own life? Have you ever trusted a mentor who called you family, only to watch them lie to the authorities just to make sure you never find a job again? My name is Sienna, and before I found a way to fight back, I was a woman who lost her entire life to a single, cruel lie. I worked as the head sous chef for Chef Marcus Thorne at his world-famous restaurant for 10 years. While Marcus was traveling the world and acting like a star on TV, I was the one in the hot kitchen every single night, making sure every plate was perfect. I lived on coffee and 4 hours of sleep, saving every penny of my tips because I wanted to open my own small bistro called The Heirloom. But the day I finally handed in my notice to start my own business, Marcus didn't congratulate me. Instead, his eyes turned cold, and he decided that if I wasn't working for him, I wouldn't be working at all. The very next morning, the health inspectors showed up for a surprise inspection. They walked straight to my private locker, a place only Marcus and I had keys for, and pulled out a crate of stinking, rotten shellfish. They also found fake temperature logs with my signature forged at the bottom, making it look like I had been serving dangerous food for months. Before I could even process what was happening, the news vans were already at the back door. Marcus stood in front of the cameras, wiping away fake tears as he told the reporters he was horrified by my negligence. Because of his power and those planted evidences, my cooking license was revoked on the spot. I was blacklisted from every high-end kitchen in the country. My savings for The Heirloom were swallowed up by lawyers, and my reputation was trashed. I went from being a rising star to a public health threat with $12 in my bank account, watching Marcus win Chef of the Year on the back of the work I had done. For 6 months, I was a ghost. No restaurant would even let me wash dishes once they heard my name. I finally found a low-paying job at a massive industrial food factory called BioFlavors, Inc. I wasn't wearing my chef's whites anymore. I was in a plastic lab suit, mixing chemical bases for food supplies. Then I saw a secret order on the factory computer. Marcus Thorne had signed a huge deal to buy his signature truffle oil and artisan sauce mix from our factory. He was telling his customers everything was farm to table, but he was actually buying cheap, lab-made chemicals from us. I realized then that the man who destroyed my life was a complete fraud, and I was the one holding the mixing spoon. Marcus was chosen to cook for the World Unity Summit, a dinner for the most powerful leaders on Earth, shown live on TV to millions. He planned to use our lab's golden emulsifier to make his famous sauce. I stayed late for weeks in the lab, slowly changing the formula of the batch meant for his kitchen. I added a harmless, tasteless powder that reacts to heat and oxygen. In the bottle, it looked like high-end oil. But I knew the science. The moment that liquid hit a hot pan and met the air, his perfect dinner was going to turn into a science fair disaster. On the night of the summit, I watched the live stream from my tiny apartment. Marcus was on stage, soaking up the applause and telling the cameras, "Only a purist like me can create such a golden, natural sauce." He poured the liquid into the pans. Suddenly, the kitchen filled with a loud hissing sound. The sauce didn't turn gold. It turned a bright, glowing, neon electric blue. A thick, foul-smelling foam started growing like a volcano, smelling exactly like rotten eggs and wet dog. The world leaders recoiled in disgust as the blue sludge bubbled over the plates and onto their expensive suits. Marcus stood there frozen as the cameras zoomed in on the factory bottles he hadn't hidden. He was exposed as a liar in front of the whole planet, and for the first time in a long time, I finally felt like I could breathe. After the blue disaster, Marcus's restaurant was empty, but my work was just beginning. I knew Marcus couldn't have planted that rotten shellfish alone. He was never in the kitchen early enough. I reached out to a former dishwasher who had always been kind to me. Over a cup of coffee, he dropped a bombshell. He saw Leo, the junior chef I had personally trained, sneaking into the locker room with a heavy cooler the morning of the inspection. Leo was the one I trusted most, the one I treated like a younger brother. It turned out Marcus had promised Leo my job as head sous chef if he helped get rid of me. I didn't get angry. I got even. I sent Leo an anonymous message from a burner phone with a photo of him entering the locker room that morning, a photo the dishwasher had secretly snapped. The rat was now trapped in his own cage. I knew the health inspector, Mr. Grimes, was too thorough to accidentally find a crate of fish in a private locker unless he knew exactly where to look. I used some of the money I earned at the factory to hire a private investigator to follow Grimes for a week. We caught him meeting Marcus at a dark bar on the outskirts of town. The photos showed Marcus sliding a thick envelope across the table. It wasn't just a surprise inspection, it was a paid hit. I didn't go to the police yet. Instead, I mailed a copy of those photos to Grimes's home address with a simple note. I know the price of your soul. Tell the truth, or everyone else will know too. Back at the BioFlavors factory, I dug deeper into the shipping logs. I discovered that Marcus wasn't just buying cheap sauce bases. He was also buying a banned chemical preservative to make his food last longer in the fridge. This chemical was known to cause severe stomach pain, but it made his profit margins huge. Marcus was telling the public he was a health advocate, but he was actually feeding them poison to save money. I took samples of the chemical and the shipping invoices and locked them in my own secret safe. I now had enough evidence to not just ruin his career, but to put him behind bars for a long time. Marcus tried to save his reputation by announcing a redemption dinner. He claimed the blue sauce was a terrorist attack on his kitchen and promised to cook a 10-course meal using only garden-fresh ingredients to prove his honesty. He invited the city's top food critics and the mayor. What he didn't know was that I had already talked to his new vegetable supplier. I made sure that every single fresh crate delivered to his kitchen that morning came with a hidden gift, a small, high-tech microphone and a hidden camera tucked into the bottom of a cabbage crate. As Marcus prepped for the biggest night of his life, I sat in my car with a laptop, watching and listening as he yelled at Leo to mix the chemical preservative into the soup so nobody notices the wilting greens. I had him on tape, confessing to everything. While Marcus was busy prepping for his redemption dinner, I was busy in my apartment. I didn't just have a video, I had a mountain of evidence. I created a social media account called The Real Kitchen Nightmare and posted the first clip. Marcus Thorne screaming at Leo to pour the chemicals in because the vegetables were starting to rot. The video went viral in minutes. People who had eaten at his restaurant and gotten sick started commenting by the thousands. The Golden Chef was being torn apart online before he even served the first course of his big dinner. I sat back and watched the view count climb into the millions. The world was finally seeing the man behind the mask. The viral video caught the attention of an old friend who worked in the accounting office of Marcus's main food supplier. She reached out to me with a gift, a digital copy of a secret ledger. It proved that Marcus had been overcharging the city's school lunch program for years, claiming he was providing premium organic meals, while actually sending them the lowest quality scraps from BioFlavors Inc. This wasn't just a restaurant scandal anymore. This was a crime against the community. I added the ledger to my growing file of evidence. Marcus thought he was just fighting a disgruntled employee, but he was actually facing a full-scale investigation into his entire business empire. My private investigator called me with even bigger news. He had tracked down the bank account used to pay off the health inspector, Mr. Grimes. The money hadn't come directly from Marcus. It had come from a shell company registered in the name of Marcus's silent partner. This meant Marcus wasn't working alone. There was someone else at the top helping him bury anyone who tried to leave his shadow. I realized that to truly win, I had to take down the whole structure, not just the man in the chef's hat. I instructed the investigator to dig into the shell company and find out who really owned it. Leo, the rat in the kitchen, was starting to crack under the pressure of the viral videos. He called me, crying and begging for mercy. He admitted that Marcus was blackmailing him with an old mistake Leo had made years ago. I told Leo there was only one way out. He had to record Marcus confessing to planting the fish in my locker. That night, Leo wore a wire into Marcus's private office. He caught Marcus laughing about how easy it was to crush Sienna and how the health inspector was firmly in his pocket. I finally had the confession I needed in Marcus's own arrogant voice. The trap was set, and the redemption dinner was about to become his final meal. While the world was busy watching Marcus's downfall on social media, I received a call from Chef Anton, Marcus's biggest rival in the city. He had seen my Real Kitchen Nightmare posts and knew I was the mastermind behind the blue sauce. He didn't want to exploit me. He wanted to help. Anton offered me his top-tier legal team and a temporary kitchen to prepare for my own comeback. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend," he said with a grin. He also gave me the last piece of the puzzle, the name of Marcus's silent partner. It was a local politician who had been protecting Marcus from health violations for years. Now, I wasn't just taking down a chef, I was taking down a corrupt system. I knew Marcus kept a physical backup of his forged records in a safe at his home. With the help of the dishwasher who had the spare keys, I slipped into Marcus's house while he was at the restaurant doing a late-night press interview. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened the safe using the code I had guessed from his signature ingredients. Inside, I found the original temperature logs, the real ones, showing that the kitchen had been perfect until the day he framed me. I also found a list of every bribe he had ever paid to Mr. Grimes. I snapped photos of everything and slipped out just as his car pulled into the driveway. I spent the rest of the night uploading the photos and Leo's secret recording to a secure cloud drive. I sent the link to 3 major news outlets and the district attorney's office with a timer set for the middle of the redemption dinner. I also found the digital trail for the shell company. The politician hadn't just been protecting Marcus, he was using the restaurant to launder money. By connecting Marcus's fake, organic invoices to the shell company's bank records, I had created a map that led straight to prison. The paper trail was now a noose. The morning of the big dinner, Marcus appeared on a national morning show. He looked tired and desperate. He tried to blame the viral videos on AI-generated deepfakes and promised that tonight's meal would prove his innocence. He even tried to call me, leaving a shaky voicemail offering to pay me off if I stopped the leaks. I didn't answer. I just listened to the recording and added it to the evidence folder. He wasn't sorry for what he did to me. He was only sorry he got caught. He had no idea that while he was begging for my silence, the police were already reading my emails. The redemption dinner was packed with the city's most important people. The mayor, famous food critics, and even a few Hollywood stars sat at long, candlelit tables. Marcus was in the center of the room, acting like he had already won. He was telling jokes and pouring wine, completely unaware that 4 of his guests were actually undercover detectives. I sat in a van across the street, wearing a headset. I could hear everything through the microphones I had hidden in the kitchen crates. Marcus was so arrogant that he even bragged to a critic about how he dealt with his former assistant who tried to sabotage him. Every word was being recorded by the police. While the dinner was being served, a special emergency hearing was happening at the city hall. Thanks to the evidence I sent, the health board was reviewing my case in real time. My lawyer, provided by Chef Anton, presented the original temperature logs and the photos of the bribes. By the time Marcus was serving his 3rd course, the board had already made their decision. They officially cleared my name and issued an immediate warrant for the arrest of Mr. Grimes, the corrupt inspector. The first pillar of Marcus's empire had officially fallen. One of the guests at the dinner stood up. It was an elderly woman who used to be Marcus's business partner years ago, someone he had also cheated and ruined. She had seen my viral videos and decided to fly in just for this moment. She didn't wait for the police. She stood up in the middle of the room and called Marcus a thief and a fraud. She told the crowd exactly how he stole the recipes that made him famous. The room went silent. Marcus tried to laugh it off, but his hands were shaking so hard he spilled red wine all over his white chef's jacket. It looked like blood. Suddenly, the doors to the restaurant swung open. It wasn't more guests, it was the police and the district attorney. They didn't wait for him to finish the meal. They walked straight through the dining room and into the kitchen. The guests began to panic. People stood up, recording the scene on their phones. The police found the bottles of banned chemicals sitting right on the counter. Marcus screamed that it was a mistake, but when the lead detective played the recording of Marcus telling Leo to pour the chemicals in, the room went dead quiet. The Golden Chef was handcuffed in front of his elite guests, and the restaurant was cleared out in minutes. By midnight, the gilded plate was empty, dark, and locked. The morning after the arrest, Marcus's world turned upside down. Because I had sent the proof of money laundering to the authorities, the bank froze every single one of his accounts. He couldn't pay his staff, his rent, or his expensive lawyers. I stood across the street as the bank officials taped, seized, notices to the front doors of his 3 different mansions. The man who had left me with only $12 in my pocket now couldn't even buy a cup of coffee. Every cent he had stolen from the school lunch program and his employees was being clawed back by the state. I wasn't the only one he had hurt. Once the news broke that I had been cleared, a class action lawsuit was filed. Over 50 former employees, servers he had cheated out of tips and cooks he had bullied, joined together. The lawsuit was for millions of dollars. My lawyer led the charge, using the secret ledger I found to show exactly how much Marcus owed everyone. In court, he looked small and gray, no longer the shining star of the food world. The judge ruled that his remaining assets would be sold at auction to pay back the people he had stepped on to get to the top. The lab results from BioFlavors Inc. finally came back. It was worse than I thought. The signature truffle oil Marcus sold for $100 a bottle contained 0 truffles. It was mostly flavored industrial grease and the banned preservative I had discovered. The health department released a public warning, telling everyone to throw away his products immediately. The Marcus Thorne brand became toxic. Supermarkets pulled his frozen pizzas off the shelves and tossed them into dumpsters. His name was no longer a sign of quality, it was a warning of a scam. While waiting for his trial in a holding cell, Marcus finally snapped. He started yelling at the walls, blaming everyone but himself. He tried to claim that I was a witch who had used magic to turn his sauce blue. His lawyers tried to argue that he wasn't mentally fit for trial, but the recordings I had made of him calmly planning the bribes and the framing proved he was perfectly sane, just perfectly evil. He had spent his life acting for the cameras, but now that the cameras were showing the truth, he didn't know how to survive. The day I walked into the health department building, I wasn't a public health threat anymore. I was a guest of honor. The new head of the board, who had replaced the corrupt Mr. Grimes, personally handed me my gold-sealed cooking license. They issued a formal, public apology to me on their website, admitting that the state had been used as a weapon to hurt an innocent woman. I held that piece of paper in my hands and cried for the first time in months. It wasn't just a license. It was my name, my honor, and my future returned to me. Chapter 26, The Grand Opening of the Heirloom. With the money I won from the lawsuit and the investment from Chef Anton, I finally bought the perfect location for my bistro. It wasn't a cold, glass skyscraper like Marcus's place. It was a warm, brick building with a huge open kitchen. I named it the Heirloom. On the morning of the grand opening, there was a line around the block. People weren't there because of a TV show. They were there because they knew I was a real chef who cared about real food. I looked at my staff, many of whom were the honest workers who had fled Marcus's kitchen, and felt like I was finally home. The restaurant was buzzing on the first night. In the middle of the dinner rush, a woman walked in and asked for a table. It was the same food critic who had seen the Blue Disaster live. She sat by the kitchen and watched me work. She didn't order anything fancy. She asked for my simple roasted chicken and garden vegetables. When she finished, she walked up to the pass, shook my hand, and said, "This is what a real chef tastes like." The next day, her review called the Heirloom the heart of the city. I didn't need a golden sauce to be a star. While my restaurant was thriving, Marcus's trial finally ended. The evidence was so overwhelming that the jury only needed 2 hours to decide. He was found guilty of fraud, forgery, and public endangerment. The judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at me in the back of the courtroom. He expected to see anger or a smirk, but I just looked at him with nothing. He wasn't my mentor anymore. He wasn't even a rival. He was just a man who had traded his soul for a lie and lost everything in the exchange. 6 months into his sentence, Marcus sat in the prison cafeteria. The man who once charged $500 for a tasting menu was now staring at a plastic tray of gray, lukewarm mystery meat. The irony was heavy. The meal had been prepared by the same conglomerate factory, BioFlavors Inc., that he had used to cheat his customers. He took a bite and immediately began to gag. The food was packed with the same cheap preservatives and fake flavorings he once championed. He looked at the television bolted to the cafeteria wall. A news segment was playing about the culinary revolution happening in the city. There was my face, smiling and vibrant, being awarded a Michelin star. Marcus threw his tray against the wall in a fit of rage, but the guards just laughed. In here, he wasn't a celebrity. He was just a number eating the same fake food he used to sell. Back at the heirloom, the atmosphere was the opposite of Marcus's world. The kitchen was filled with the smell of fresh herbs, real butter, and honest work. I stood at the pass, plating a dish for a young girl and her father. I realized that my revenge wasn't just about the blue sauce or the prison sentence. It was about building something that Marcus could never understand, a community built on trust. I took a moment to look at my bank account on my phone. It wasn't about the millions I had won. It was about the fact that I never had to worry about having only $12 ever again. I walked out into the dining room to greet my guests, wearing my clean, white chef's coat with my own name embroidered on the chest. I had lost everything. But in the process, I found out who I truly was. The taste of success wasn't salty or bitter. It was perfectly, beautifully sweet.